Ooh, looking at all these beautiful crab apples. It means it's time for some crab apple cider. Picked a few buckets of these apples, so let's get processing and see if I need to pick more or not. Got a big tub full of water here just to rinse off these apples. And I'm going to use this Brewing juicer. I've used this before on such projects and been pretty happy with the results. So let's get making some juice. So as I'm making this fresh juice here, you can see that you wind up with a lot of foam. Some of this will dissipate and you'll wind up with something a little bit chunkier. That takes quite a while to happen. So what I wind up doing here is actually just pouring through a small metal sieve, all of it. And this one's actually the perfect size for that. Then I wind up taking this bowl, and as you can see, there's definitely juice that's happening in here. And I do this, then still, I am winding up with obviously some foam in here, but I can go ahead and skim that off as well and then just run that back through the same sieve. This foam there's really no way to get rid of it once it's into the finished product, and you'll never get anything that's anywhere near clear. So I just try to get it out of here now just for aesthetic effect in the finished product. All right, so crab apple cider. Now, I could pick all the crab apples that I've got on my tree and probably do about a carboys worth of crab apple cider, but I want to do 2 carboys of crab apple cider. Plus, it's a pretty intense flavor if I go straight crab apples for the whole thing. I've done it before, but it was myself and a couple other select friends that really enjoyed it. My wife didn't want any of it. It was just like too tart. So I am going to be cutting it down a little bit with some apple juice and then also possibly some filtered water, because the last straight apple juice recipe that I did of cider came out at it was original gravity of 1050, but it came out at 6.8% alcohol, and I'm looking for something a little bit lower than that, something where I can have more than a few and still be pretty good. So we are going to dilute that a little bit, and again, using the crab apples, which have a ton of flavor in them, I think we're going to get away with it. So let's get some apple juice. What I have in here so far is just the juice from those crab apples. This is about 15.5 liters or so, according to the sight glass on here. There's still a little bit of foam coming in here. As this heats up, I should be able to deal with that and skim just a little bit more off, but this is a pretty good starting point. So now I want to get some apple juice, some store-bought apple juice for this. Now, as far as store-bought apple juice goes, I've used a few different kinds before. Honestly, any apple juice, as long as it's not nasty. Like if you can drink it as apple juice, it'll work for this. So I'm just using 1 liter of this, meaning I'm going to be cutting open a bunch of them and firing them in here. I'm not worried about sanitation or anything at this point, because part of what I'm doing here is pasteurizing while I steep for a little bit here in this mash tun. So I've got some work ahead of me here. Juice dumping pro tip. I'm just going to cut off the end there. As soon as I get in here, jab up here, then you're shotgunning your container. And it comes out just a little bit easier. Look at that appetizing juice. So what I have here, it actually turned out to be about 16 liters of the crab apple juice that was in here. I wound up adding to that 18 liters of the store purchased just plain old apple juice, and then 7 liters of filtered water, and that's giving me an original gravity of 1036, which is perfect because I'm trying to get something that's going to land in probably that mid 4% range alcohol wise in the finished product. So let's get this heated up, and also there's more. Now that we're heated up to pasteurization temp, you can see that there is a skiff of that foam, so I'm going to need both of my hands, and I'm just going to skim as much of that off as I can. I've nearly all of that foam off of there. There's just some isolated bits. It actually looks far, far brighter and whiter in the video here than it does in reality. But now it is time for the secret edition. And what is that, you ask? The reddest, brightest crab apples that I picked off of there are just going in as is. I'm not cutting these just because of the whole apple seed situation, so not bothering with that. But the idea here is just to impart some extra flavor, possibly, you know, impact the color a little bit, maybe get some extra redness into it from these apples here. And I'm just going to let them steep in here the entire time that this is pasteurizing. So I'm going to give this between 2.5 and 3 hours, which will be plenty of time for this to not only pasteurize at 130 Fahrenheit or that 154 degrees Celsius range. But yeah, pick up some extra character from these crab apples. Let's take a peek. Ta-da! Bobbing for crab apples time maybe, huh? So I'm going to let these steep here. I'm going to cover this up now. I'll actually take my spoon, whoop, hang it like that, and I've got this set up in the brew stand, just using, there we go. I've just got my thermal well set up here, and you can see that it's set up for that temperature range. I'm going to set a timer here for probably 3 hours and just let it do its thing. So I'm actually just starting to run off, but I should show you that these crab apples here, looks like a lot of them lost a lot of that sweet redness, which was undoubtedly put into this, because obviously look how red it is. Well, not really. It is a nice nice kind of dark goldy color. It's a little hazy though, but we'll see if that pectic enzyme that we're going to add here in a bit will do anything to that. So I'm going to fill up both of these carboys here and get them downstairs. Of course, I should mention I did this in my mash tun here, and it's got the false bottom on it, which is why I was able to just leave those apples loose like that. If I didn't have that, if I was using the boil kettle on the brew stand, I would have used some like a big hop sock or some mesh of some kind, or big stock balls to contain them. All right, so it is pectic enzyme time. So I had 100 mils of filtered water in here. I also had a stir bar that I sat here, and I boiled this water. I added the pectic enzyme. It was 2 teaspoons per carboy is what I was gauging here. So it was 4 teaspoons that I put into here. Let it fully dissolve, and because it's 100 mils, I'm going to try to essentially eyeball 50 mils per. And there we are. I'm adding this to these beers before the yeast because from what I understand, the yeast fermentation would mess up some of what that pectic enzyme is attempting to do. So we're going to do this here. It's getting on at night here, and in the morning I will be pitching the yeast. The next morning we are ready to add some yeast. You hear some bubbling going on. That's just these this black currant saison that I've got fermenting up over here. It's obviously nice and happy. So before I pitch that yeast, I'm just going to rock these carboys. I just did this one here. I'm just agitating it and getting some air into it, so aerating, as opposed to oxygenating, which I think would probably be excessive and unnecessary with that 1036 original gravity here. So I'm just doing this for close to a minute or so, and then I'll be able to add that yeast. Yeast time! So I'm going to be using this Mangrove Jack's cider yeast. It's their MO2. I've used it before on cider and I really liked it. What I did is when I pressure cooked my plate chiller, I also had 150 mils of water in a couple of flasks with a stir bar, and that's how I rehydrated this yeast, so it's all ready to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I like using the rehydration, not just because it's probably a little bit easier on the yeast, but it makes adding the yeast quite a bit easier than trying to sprinkle it in and hopefully not getting it stuck around the shoulders or what have you there. Can't forget my magnet, or I'm going to wind up with the stir bar in here. All right, here we are. Now that I've got that yeast in here, I'm just going to get this set up with my thermal wells and the blow-off tubes. And we are pitched. We've got our heat wraps on. We've got our blow-off tubes and the thermal wells there for the temperature probe. Awesome. So these are sitting at 69 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit here, respectively. I was originally planning on doing this at 68. However, my basement's still just a little bit too warm. This is the heat of August right now. So it'll still be fine. It's definitely within range. So I'll just wait for this to kick off with the fermentation. We're already here with the blow-off tubes, the thermal wells, with the temperature probes and all that. We're sitting at right around 69 Fahrenheit here, which is going to be totally fine, and I'm just waiting for fermentation to kick off. Sometime overnight, these kicked off here. Nice little fermentation going on. Fabulous. So I'm going to hold these at 69 Fahrenheit here for a little bit before I start to ramp them up. So probably a couple of days. As soon as it looks like fermentation is dying down at all, that's when I'm going to start kicking it up. After these ciders hit high Krausen, I let them ferment for a couple of days at the same temperature and then gradually increased up to 75 Fahrenheit, where I held that until we hit terminal gravity, which reading below the meniscus appears to be 1003. And once that was done, I gradually cooled these down. They've been sitting here for a couple of days in the mid 60s, which is what my basement temperature is right now. And I am now once that was done, I gradually cooled them down. They've been sitting in the mid 60s here, which is my basement temp, for a couple of days. Just letting some of that yeast drop out a little bit more. And now I am pressure transferring into these corny kegs. After transferring those ciders into the corny kegs, I chilled them down in gelatin, fined them, really just to try to get rid of any residual yeast that was still in solution. Then I transferred them into destination corny kegs, force carbonated them. You can check all those processes in the brewing playlist on the channel. Now it's on tap. So we've got a sparkling cider on tap. Let's try it out. Oh yeah, see that nice carbonation in there? Oh yeah, nice cold crabapple cider. Let's get this outside. Whew, it is nice and hot outside. I'm actually hiding in the shade here, but it's delightful. We've got this little crabapple cider. Let's give her a taste. And I'm telling you, I love a sparkling cider. You have that nice carbonic acid and those fun little bubbles running through there. It makes it just so fizzy and scintillating. As far as the flavor goes, there is definitely some of that crabapple character in here. It's really nice and tart. You can see, obviously, we didn't pick up much color at all out of those skins, but we definitely picked up some tannins, and it's contributing to this just really, really refreshing, tart, carbonated cider. This is a great way to be able to make a super flavorful, easy to brew cider, and to do it without having to process an absolute ton of crab apples, because it takes a lot of them to make the cider if you were just using them. So anyway, it's a win. If you want to give it a whirl, please do, and let me know how it turns out for you. And until next time, keep your apples at 11.